All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Looks like we have a great group of people in. I can see the attendance list is growing. So super excited that you're all here. Super excited to have Nicholas Russo with us today to dig in on this
Hello,
week's
Mark.
topic. Say hello, Nicholas. All right.
Hello. Hi, Mark.
All right. So I wanted to go ahead and get us started, but please add questions to the queue. We found that as you're in and you've got ideas and suggestions, and maybe when you saw the topic, you had some topics in mind, some questions in mind. You could go ahead and plug them in. I'll interject as it goes when the topic hits the right question. And we'll take it from there. But your participation makes the process a lot better. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Nicholas and say welcome. And if you could share the agenda.
Thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to move forward in the agenda of this SAM Best Practice webinar. So we have this monthly call, which covers various topics. And today, and the July SAM Best Practice webinar will be about the enterprise groups, which means locations, corporate units, cost centers, and we will see how this metadata, which is sort of underlying links in the item information, can help a lot in moving forward in the maturities. So we will start with seeing how enterprise groups and bring more context around this topic. We will see how we can use enterprise groups for user roles in details. We will also understand and discuss what reporting is allowed and what data slicing is allowed with enterprise groups. And finally, we will see how the enterprise groups for license scoping can be useful because there are sometimes complex terms and conditions that need to be reflected in the way Flexera one item is computing license consumption, and that will be the last topic before closing with the news and references. Okay, so I will maybe stop my camera, and this will go mostly with screen sharing. So let's stop the camera. Here we go. And I will try to switch between the slides and some live data that I will demo in the tool. That's the goal of these sessions, to have a hands-on view of what exists, what can be done, and how it works. So let's move on. So we will start with the last session's questions. Last session was about VMware Broadcom licensing changes. So some reactions of people happy to see me again, and I'm also very happy to meet you again. Now I've started my own adventure in a services company. That's always good to be in touch again with the Flexera ecosystem and to keep helping, particularly on this best practice side. Another question that we have at each session was where can we find the PDF or the presentation? So it will actually be soon available in the Flexera community. This is a Learn Events and Webinars section. There will be a recording announcement, which is going to be posted, I would say, very soon in the next 5 days. And there will be both a link to the recording, which is actually on YouTube. So you have the link here. And also there is some best practice webinar playlist, which contains the 29 previous sessions. So you will get the full access to the past sessions that cover many different topics, such as license optimization, what is new in the product, and many topics managing applications. So all these topics that you will find on YouTube. Some other questions, actually quite a number of questions, were related to specific VMware modules or VMware applications, which cannot be collected which cannot be collected in the by the vCenter data import. So vSAN, NSX, GSX, there are some sort of activated features for clusters which don't come back with the inventory. And the idea is that you can develop specific connectors with the vCenter REST API, so that I would say custom work, or maybe a more efficient and more simple approach is to ask the VMware teams, which are managing very carefully which cluster has which module activated. You can get from these teams the Excel files that will contain the list of clusters and the list of activated features. And then you can, with a business adapter, re-import these modules, activated modules, as allocations to the licenses. So that's one of the trickiest parts with VMware, because VMware doesn't have, like many other applications, some simple add remove program flags. The activated features come from the license key, which is accessible in the VMware console, but or the vCenter console, but that you can't with an agent find on the servers. Okay, so I will move on, because the core of today's topic is about managing enterprise groups. And I will start with giving some context. Because, you know, enterprise groups may not seem a very exciting topic. And I will try to show that it is actually super important. And this is a sort of a foundation of some success in a large organization. I would say, you know, if you're a small company and manage your licenses in Excel, no need to slice the data, understand who does what and so on. But if you're a large organization, which is the case of many of you listening or watching us, you actually need this data. So I would start with saying that there are some $1 million questions in SAM, or sometimes multi-million-dollar questions, which are: am I compliant? What are my costs? How much could I optimize? Big topics that you can find around Oracle, Windows Server, SQL. It's often on the server application, but also on the subscriptions. And so to answer correctly these questions and to address the multi-million-dollar topics of these questions, enterprise groups are actually the metadata that allow you to understand and get a fine understanding of all these software asset management topics. So enterprise groups will help you answering these questions, which are: who is liable? Who messed up? You know, this is a lot about making mistakes or not taking accountability or ownership of the topics. Other question, you know, what processes do we have for our license governance? Is it applied across entities? And the last question is, who should I recharge? Or what should I be recharged to whom? This is actually, as you see, you know, we are shifting from the classical topics, which are around compliance and costs, or eventually optimization, to topics which are more mature, such as accountability of entities and chargeback. And in the end, with a better transparency and accountability of the stakeholders of SAM, which are not the SAM team, unfortunately. You know, the SAM team is trying to track what applications have been deployed and to make sure that you have enough licenses for that. But I would say most accountable people should be the application owners who actually deploy the applications. And with a better transparency and accountability, you go to a virtuous situation where you have a healthy and cost-effective SAM practice. So metadata, in the end, helps the success and the efficiency of the SAM processes. I just pasted here, you know, a screen capture of a Flexera 1 item. You see here that in the organization section, you have these locations, corporate units, cost centers, and even categories. This is the fourth enterprise group dimension, which is managed in ITAM. And these are the underlying links that need to be built. You need to build a tree of your locations, a tree of your corporate units. You need to maintain the links. And this is all the goal of this session, to understand how you get the data, how you keep it up to date, and what you can do with it. And there is a lot to be done. So some data is complex. You have contracts, purchase, IT devices, users, license consumption, but everything is linked in the end to locations, corporate unit, cost centers, and categories, most of the time with categories, actually. And Flexera One uses so you can manage your enterprise group data, and you can keep the links and the relevancy of the data, the integrity of the data. But once you have that in place, you can use it. And Flexera One allows you to use the enterprise groups for user roles. We will focus on how you build a user role, what it is used for, and how you can make sure that people see only what they can see and what they need to see. For reporting, of course, we will go through the various ways data can be sliced in Flexera One ITAM or FlexNet Manager if you're on premise. And we will see how the license scoping, which is a quite specific feature around managing license consumption, can use the enterprise groups and more, I would say. Can also use reports to sort of specialize, restrict the license on a given scope of computers or servers in its license calculations. So on the right, and maybe I will start, showing a little bit of data, but let's have a quick look. I will be on a non-premise demo database. Actually, I could go on. I will go actually on the cloud system, demo system, and you will see that enterprise groups are hierarchical. So I don't have so much data in this demo system, so maybe I will switch back to my local system. But you see that in organizations, for instance, and IT asset locations, you see that a location is all about a tree. So the hierarchy here is a little bit small, but you could imagine EMEA, Americas, and so on. And what we need to understand, which is also valid for any dimension, such as corporate unit location, the hierarchy that you see here in this screen that you can collapse or expand. The hierarchy is actually a path which is a series of names and dashes, and what is unique is the path. And this will be very important for the rest of this session. Everything is about, parents and children, and any right you give to a parent, let's say, location will actually be inherited to the children. Okay, so this is the same type of screen that you will get for corporate units, for instance, and corporate units and the cost centers. I don't think here we have a lot of hierarchies. Yeah, it's a little bit flat in this case, but here you may have, some parents and children. Actually, it's very limited. But the idea that you can store in ITAM 1, 2, 3 dimensions. Categories is a little bit specific, and these 3 dimensions will be hierarchical and will allow you to reflect the foundation data and the links between your various sub-objects and your organizations and your cost centers and your locations. So let's move on. And of course, I will not go to, but if you open the detail of a computer, you will see this ownership tab, which is showing the links that you have with these locations, corporate units, and so on. So before seeing how we maintain and build the tree and the links, what is the source of truth for enterprise group information? So maybe I will start with the first item, which is should Flexera one item be the source of truth? And that's something I shared in a session I made 1 year ago about integration with the CMDB. In sum, let's be efficient, let's be selfish. I mean, CMDB job is to maintain the configuration, is to reflect changes, is to reflect who has access or who is using what server, for instance. So I would say it's better if you are doing ITAM or SAM, software asset management, to optimize your SQL Server consumption than managing the links between the users, the CIs, and the entities. So I would say ITAM should be a consumer. Regarding CMDB, maybe Mark, you have
Sure.
input or ideas on that because you're quite a
Sure.
specialist in that domain.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate for a chance. And you're right. When we talk about the CMDB, it's got a very important role when it comes to all things IT service management. You know, it's that core piece for incident, problem, change, request. It helps in that support aspects. But I think one of the key parts is when you start to mix it with ITAM, there's kind of there needs to be that delineation. And so the way I look at it and the way I see it is, you know, the CMDB is a system of record, and the ITAM is a system of insight, and it's where the truth lies in terms of license position, license count, the agreements, the contracts, all that good stuff, and it should be separated, but then it should also be integrated so that when they're synchronized and they're opening the right ticket for the right incident, you know, they have the right information. So it kind of comes back to system of record and system of insight. Insight comes from ITAM, and then system of record for support for all things ITIL.
Perfect. Thank you. That's clear. Maybe one pointer you may want to go to, and this presentation will also be available in the announcement of the recording. You have this presentation that I made a while ago. It was in June 2022. And this presentation goes in depth into how you can integrate ITAM or FlexNet Manager with CMDB. And you get examples. You get various explanations on what the role of assets are to manage the difference between what the expected world is, which is the CMDB, and what the actual world or actual inventory world is. You will get all these details in this recording or in the presentation which is attached. So let's move back to the presentation. So CMDB, indeed. Thank you, Mark. This is a good source of truth, and this is the core work of people managing configurations to make sure that the data is accurate and updated. Another source I've seen in some projects, but honestly not very often reliable, which is more related to users, is Active Directory. You have in Active Directory there is a company and there is a department attribute that you can find related to the users, the Active Directory accounts. And this data could be used, but I've seen a lot cases where the data is not maintained. So people join a company, it's up to date, and as they move to another entity, the records in Active Directory don't move. So, but that's a possibility, and integrating ITAM or to a CMDB or to Active Directory is very simple. You can do that with the out-of-the-box integrations that you have for ServiceNow, for instance. But also you can use a Business Adapter Studio, where you will, as a source, connect to the CMDB using REST APIs or CSV files and so on, or Active Directory using LDAP. Language protocol, and you will be able to read the data and update Flexera One with the data. The last option to manage and maintain the enterprise groups is using scripts. So it can look cumbersome, but in the end, that's a little bit the most reliable way if you have, let's say, a good governance around how you name your servers, if you know what are the subnets and what location they are related to, which is sort of a hard-coded logic in nearly any IT organization, you can go and be very advanced in the way you can compute the location or the corporate unit of your, let's say, IT estate with a script. And maybe because most of you online are on the cloud version of ITAM, being on the cloud version and having no access to the database doesn't mean that you can do very extensive scripting and very advanced things. So this is a solution I posted something like 5 years ago when I was in the services at Flexera, and you will see there is in this document that you will get a link for, there is a full solution that allows to use, so this is in the embedded document, but you can use this solution where basically data is read from the ITAM instance, typically the list of computers or list of devices which have no location or cost center or corporate unit. And this list will come with the IP address, for instance, or the domain. And locally, you can actually run a script in what we call a staging database, a local SQL database. You can run a script which will be very sophisticated, check the IP address against a reference table that contains all the subnets and the locations, for instance. And in the end, you can update your ITAM instance with the data that you have sort of computed in this scripted step. So I will not lose too much time on that, but that's interesting to know that scripts are also absolutely relevant to Flexera One ITAM, particularly with the new with REST APIs that have been available for years now, where you can, for instance, convert any report that you created in Flexera One ITAM. You can extract the report by using, for instance, the report execute REST API. So let's move on, but you have multiple ways, and I would say CMDB is probably one of the best ones if you have, I would say, an efficient CMDB in place. So there are two steps in managing enterprise groups. First step is to create the reference tree. So being able to build the list of locations, being able to build the list of cost centers or corporate units that you have. And I will not spend too much time going to a true Business Adapter Studio, but in the Business Adapter Studio, you can build a mapping between source data. I think in this case, that was an Excel file, and the locations, for instance, or corporate units that you can create. So two things important. So this example is about maintaining the links between the contracts, for instance, or the purchase orders, more precisely. You see that we have the name of the location of the purchase order, and the location ID is here in the mapping of the purchase order section, which creates actually the purchase order line. So the idea that there are really two steps, and you should not mix both. First step is to create the reference tree. You can, for this, go on the UI in the screen, for instance, and create one by one. It can be a little bit long. You can also use a business adapter, which allows to create locations, corporate units, and cost centers. And one interesting thing is that you can do a recursive creation. I mean, if you import an Excel file which has 3 lines, one with Europe/USA/New York, and the second, it was Americas/USA/New York, and the second line, which is EMEA/Italy/Roma, for instance, the business adapter will create 6 lines because it will create the parent, the children, and even if you directly create a child, it will recursively create the parents which are in the path. So good to know. This is very easy to create a reference tree, a location tree, corporate unit tree, or cost center with the business adapter. And then, second step is to maintain the links between the locations and the corporate, the locations, for instance, and the computers. And here, you should always make sure that you don't update the locations which are reference data with the business importer, where you are supposed to update only your computer's location. So because you may not trust what people have put in Excel or what the CMDB has done. Normally, CMDB should be reliable. But I would say that we should sort of separate the reference data creation from the records updates and not create on the fly from the records update. Hopefully, I'm clear on that. A special case. Let's go back to the UI. Let's go to a demo system, my local demo system. Let's say, in your so it will happen more in corporate units, actually. Imagine a child entity to the parent entity. So here I'm sure I have a flat list like the demo system. Okay, so this is a little bit flat, but let's imagine, under this CSC entity, I have a child, which is, okay, so I will maybe not, okay, I will remove the filter, does not contain. And I will put actually the series flat again. And let's say, under this corporate unit acquisition company, let's imagine I have another child, which is, M&A, for instance. Okay, so here, if I want, and it happens often in organizations, if M&A moves from Allianz, I didn't click on the right plus, to, let's say, acquisition company or to Decabank, you cannot simply change the reference data and say, I'm moving this one to this one, no drag and drop. So the steps to change the tree of your organizations will be to create a new one, which will be acquisition company / M&A. Okay, then link all the records that you have, which were previously linked to M&A, to the new M&A, which has a unique path. So just adding the path to show how it works. Okay, the path is not here, it's here. And then, once you have created the new one, you need to relink the purchase, the contract, the users, and the computers. So it's not, I would say, a very quick and easy task to reflect a mega organization change, such as, mother company is taking a new child from another mother company. So I just wanted to insist on that because that's a case I often got in trainings or in real life. You need actually to do multiple steps, and the best way to do that is, of course, with the Business Adapter Studio, where you can extract all the data, update to the new link, to the new entity, and relink the records. Okay, so that was the first step. What enterprise groups are. You can use enterprise groups for multiple things. We will see 3 of them. The first one is making sure that you have your user roles correctly focused on what they can or what they need to see. The user roles, any enterprise tool has the ability to manage in a fine grain or not what people can access and see. And I would say Flexera One Item is quite deep into the sophistication. So first, we have an example here of a role, for instance. I will just to show you and zoom a little bit. You see here that a role is defined by two blocks, I would say. The top one, which is access rights, what entity you can access to. So here, this is a role that says USA, but you can also mix, dimensions on what people can access. So you maybe, specifically accessing USA, but only for the corporate IT, which is IT Corp, for instance, and the cost center, eventually, even more precisely. Just checking, do you hear me okay, Mark? Is everything clear?
Yes,
Okay.
everything's clear. You did mute for a little bit, but then you came right back.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are a few questions. I don't know if you're ready for some questions just yet, or you want to work through this next section. It's your call.
Yeah, or maybe, let's take them now because, people will be more in user roles and maybe the questions were about entities. So let's move on with the question.
Great.
Okay.
So there's one question. Can we link user roles to to AD groups to manage access to Flexera's on-prem or SaaS?
Yeah. So AD groups. Quite new. Now you can see the AD groups of users in Flexera One Item. The link is available in the list of employees. So when you create a new report from user, you can see its AD group. The question is more, can we automate the role assignments with converting the AD groups that people belong to and automatically allocate them with a role which is aligned with their AD group? And the short answer is it's not very simple. You can not create on the fly a role unless you do a very complex, you can do a very complex SQL business adapter. So it would be on premise only. You can eventually link users to roles, again, with a business adapter studio, which would be a little bit sophisticated. So I would say, generally, you don't have hundreds of people accessing item. That will be one of my best practice approach advice. So it's more in the UI that you can, enable a user, create a user, and then give him a role or multiple roles. That's one of the complexities. It's not a one-to-one link. Eventually, if you had your roles predefined, if you had your AD groups clearly mapping to the roles, there could be a business adapter, which would be, I would say, provided the user already exists, because you can't create a user on the fly, or it's even more complex. You could have eventually a business adapter using SQL queries to update and relink the users. But I would say it's quite complicated. Okay, next question.
Got it. Sure. How do the enterprise groups assigned to inventory device records work with assignments to asset records? Ooh, let me try that again.
Oh yeah, I see. So it could be a long topic actually. The CMDB, integration session I delivered in 2022 covered this part. Basically, there is a synchronization between the assets and the inventory devices. And if you update an asset, so honestly, you need to sit down, check the doc, and be quite precise. But there are some synchronizations which are automated. Typically, the status of the asset will be reflected as ignored or active for the computer, for the inventory device. And the cost centers, you can update your inventory device cost center through the asset cost center, but there are some features around that. There are some options. So just have a look to that, and I will not go into many details, but in the system settings, you can actually set up the synchronization between your assets and your inventory device corporate units or enterprise groups. So because you don't want something inconsistent. You don't want an asset to belong to an entity and its related inventory device to belong to another. So if it opens, if you open that, okay, you see here in the inventory or assets actually, synchronize enterprise groups in device and asset properties. If you don't do that, you could absolutely move to an inconsistent situation where somebody manually updates the computer or the inventory device and somebody the asset, and it's inconsistent. Okay, do you have another question?
Sure. The questions are rolling in, so thank you. We appreciate all the questions. Are there any business adapter templates that can be used and adapted by customers rather than starting an adapter from scratch? The ability to use best practice adapter templates.
So to be honest, I prefer building from scratch the business adapter, but it's maybe because I've been doing that for 10 years. But yes, if you go to any beacon, so I'm opening here the full version of the Business Adapter Studio, but on the beacon, you also have a UI to build the business adapter. This is the same with a little bit more limitations. And here, if you go to Program Data, Flexera Software, Beacon, and Business Adapter, no, not this one, example CSV. So the answer is yes, you have to look for it, but there are some templates which, so some example CSVs and some templates that, okay, so here we go. If you want to create, let's say, business units, it's corporate units. That was the old name. But if you open that, boom, you get a nice, quite short. The purchase order one will be more detailed. But you get here, the mapping, which is actually recommended. But here, you have to catch also on the same place the example CSV. And I was building, I think, a business unit. And here we go. Now we have the data. Oh, yes. So I have to... so it's just something about data encryption. Okay, so I have to restart the Business Adapter Studio. But yeah, I'm missing a DLL, which is around data encryption. But if you open the Business Adapter Studio and then pick up the mapping, if you take away the encryption, because that's what made it fail, if you pick up the related file, you get the data. So here it's probably empty, but you have just a column, which is quite simple. So yes, just go back to these folders and you will find the templates. And then once you have a little bit more, once you are more used to that, you may want to do something different or extend or do something totally different. And here it's good to start from scratch sometime. Okay.
And then just slight carry on to this question. Can you use a business adapter to make bulk relink to new locations?
Yes, definitely. That's this part actually.
Oh, perfect. Parlays perfectly.
So when you maintain, you can maintain locations, for instance, of all your computers just with a business adapter, upload, provided you have each of your computers in the source file or in the source database, provided you have a column that shows a new location, then, just by mapping the locations, here it was a purchase order creation, but you could have an update of computers. And again, you would say, no, don't create computers from this Excel file, but you could, go through the location node and then the computer node, which is, and have the location ID taken from the column, which was containing the location. So definitely, yeah, that's the recommended way. Okay. Maybe I should move forward. I don't know if you have 20 more questions or.
Nope. That was the last one. You kind of covered.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so to be fast on the user roles, so first, you can restrict a role to entities, locations, corporate units, cost centers, and even categories. And then you have the functional rights, which are actually quite an extensive screen, where you can say if people can see licenses, read only, modify, and so on. So building a user role is quite it can take a little bit of time. But it is a quite so ITAM has extensive ways of defined. I just wanted to show the multiple functional domains role. This one, for instance, and you see that it's a object by object definition of can you do read, write, full, custom. I will allow to do that, but deny to do that. So even if the user has multiple roles, he will never have the right to do it. And where it becomes complex is that you define on one side what you can see. Here it's no restriction on corporate units and cost center, but restricted on location. But you also can define, what functional domains you can access, and the complexity that you can combine roles. So it will be sort of an intersection between the dimensions. So in one role, if you have here, USA, IT Corp, and cost center one, if the device is not in these three enterprise groups, the user will not see it. So this is an intersection of the dimensions the user is restricted to. And there is a union of records. If you have, let's say, one role which is USA for Corp IT, and another role which is EMEA for marketing, both the assets or computers or contracts that you will be able to see will be either in a USA Corp IT or EMEA marketing and so on. And here, this is what I was showing very quickly. This is even more complicated because the functional domains will be sort of added one to the other. If in one role you cannot see, but for a specific set of devices, you cannot see the licenses in USA, but you can see the licenses in EMEA in a specific corporate unit. That will become very complicated, and I will rush to my recommendations, which is, keep it simple, because in the end you can have issues with performance, or even you don't understand why somebody doesn't see something, but he has 52 roles or 3 roles or 4 roles assigned, which are sometimes in contradiction one with the other. So visibility applies to contracts, purchase, users, inventory device, license consumption, I forgot, which is linked to the inventory devices. And once you set a role for a user, it will apply to screens, to reports, and to Cognos data if you use the Cognos data warehouse and Cognos reporting that you have with ITAM. Special case of licenses. Licenses can either be considered like any SAM object. So this is this one. You can see users which are let's say in USA location if you are a USA user. But then the counts, the consumption will be either the total count of the license, which I don't recommend, because if you want somebody not to see a device, you may not want him to see how much the device is consuming in terms of SQL Server, for instance. So the interesting and subtle, I would say, approach is to say that users can see all licenses with counts only for the group. So they may see the name of a license which was created by another entity, but if by mistake the other entity did not restrict the license correctly, and there is a consumption on the device of the user's entity, he will see it. So in the end, consumption are giving you the ability in these system options to either manage licenses like any other record, or ignore the enterprise groups of the license. The license may be linked to USA, but if I have a consumption which is for EMEA and I'm an EMEA user, I want to see this one, and that's the last choice. Moving on a topic which is, I would say, not easily managed out of the box, but if you apply what I'm showing now, it will work. And again, the best practice will be don't make it too complicated, but if you have users who are application owners, and you don't want a user to see anything other than Microsoft licenses or contracts, or I wouldn't say users or devices, because a device doesn't belong to Microsoft as a software publisher, you can actually verticalize the data that people see, knowing that everybody will see the computers. That's the limit, and maybe you don't want. But there is no publisher dimension in ITAM. But you can use a trick, which is linking to categories that you may not use, hopefully that you don't use to link users, computers, etc., licenses. And if you link your licenses, not users, but licenses, contracts, for instance, to categories which represent the publishers, and if you link the inventory device to devices to a category which is any publisher, and if you provide to all your users, application users, the 3 roles, one which is linked to the publisher, you can see, another which is linked to any publisher, and the last one which is software to see all the installed applications, you will be able actually to have users browsing the data, but not seeing the, let's say, other publishers' information. And there is one little thing that you need to do, which is linking the purchase to the categories. There is no way to do that in the UI, but with the Business Adapter Studio, actually, there is an easy way to link the purchase to the categories. So in the end, you have sort of created a new category dimension which links all your records, and verticalizing the data per publisher will be possible. Hopefully it opens some possibilities for those who have hit this issue so far. Some limitations. Some widgets cannot be accessed if you have restricted roles. The SAM optimization hub and the publisher hub, SAM publisher hub for history widgets. This is just that the data is too complex to compute on the fly or store. And the reports are not related to access rights. You can have a user who cannot see any report, and a user who can see reports. This is one of the many functional rights that you have. But the reports themselves cannot be hidden. You can't say, these users will not access this folder of reports. However, the content is filtered. So if a user can see only, let's say, US data, it will, running the report, which is showing the list of active computers, it will see only US active computers. So that's a small limitation. You can actually use a Power BI or any business intelligence solution where you can manage who can see what folder, and that's maybe, that will be the next slide on best practice. That's maybe a solution to say, I've limited number of users who access ITAM, Flexera 1 ITAM, they are the operators, and I have more people with more controlled access rights, at least on the reports and so on, which will access a Power BI reporting solution. Other limitation, performance impact. If you have 10 users, 10 roles assigned to a user, in the end, it may be slowing down the screens when he's trying to open a screen, because each role corresponds to a SQL, which is running in the background to filter on the fly all the data he can see or not. One thing to be aware of, there is a latency in some case in some screens. If you change somebody a role in the next minute, he may still see things that he was not authorized to see, or the license consumption may not be adapted to what he should see. This is because that there are some stored information related to the users, and this information is computed. It's sort of a post-computing process, post-reconciliation or post-inventory update. So don't be surprised if you do, let's say, a mass update of your computer cost centers. The next minute, if you open the computer screen, the old inventory screen, you may see the data that will be refreshed in the next 5 minutes. One thing to be aware of. And finally, one of the things to be aware is that null is not visible by any restricted user. So if you have devices with no location, if you think that people who can see only their scope of locations for inventory device should see it, it's good to have a sort of a forced location called unknown that everybody would be able to see, and then you won't have this sort of shadow in your data for the records which have no link to the enterprise groups. Best practice, keep it simple. Too precise or granular will kill the data readability. Typically, if you have 9 levels of locations, I have customers who are very proud to show that, you will see that the report I'm showing next in the next screen won't be able to show easily some data. Stacking roles can lead to unexpected behaviors, performance issues, or even you create a record and it disappears because it's linked to an entity which you can't see. Typically, it's linked to no entity if you forgot to put your own entity, and it can lead to strange things. And the best practice I would suggest is few operators with simple roles, which are accessing item of FlexNet Manager, and large number of consumers, data consumers, accessing some data through business intelligence tools, being Power BI or Cognos. Keep it consistent. Second best practice, if you have different sources for your CIs, your users, and your purchase, you may have multiple corporate unit trees, which is just a pain because you won't be able to cross-reference the data between purchase, license, and consumption, for instance. So try to merge the trees into a common, I would say, grammar, just to make sure that you have consistent information and you can slice the data according to consistent dimensions, or within a dimension you are consistent between objects. Don't mix dimension. I've seen customers doing a production/India corporate unit. What about the marketing/India? Is it in India or is it? So no, you have marketing on one side, you have production on the other side, and you have India, which is a country. And it's better to have 2 dimensions that you can slice data on later, instead of reinventing children of companies, which would be the country, for instance. And in the case of service-oriented organizations, which happens a lot, there is a very powerful approach, which is having twice the same tree of corporate units in corporate units and cost center. And the idea is to manage a dual allocation assignment, managed by and used by. And then you can, let's say, an IT organization which is serving 10 internal companies will see all what they manage. And the internal company, which is eventually served by 10 managing entities or IT management organization, will also see across entities because they are restricted on the cost center, while the IT organization is restricted on the corporate unit. Something very, very interesting to see, and I've done that for large organizations. Let's move on because I will have a hard time finishing in 4 minutes. So for the next use of enterprise groups is to use it for reporting. That's what we can call the data slicing. So before I'm showing reports and screens, again, you can use a role to filter data. Indeed, if you try to understand what's happening with EMEA, and you go to the computer screen and filter it, because all screens expose the locations, corporate units, or cost centers. But if you filter then, your computer, then move to the license consumption, then or the contracts, then try to understand within a license what is the consumption for EMEA, you will keep, filtering again and again. While if you have, let's say, one user, or let's say 3 users, one per entity that you can log with. So you need to be able to log with a specific login and password. This is quite easy to do. You will be able to switch from a role to another, or eventually you could have 2 users, one admin, one with a restriction, and with your admin user, you can switch the other user and log then to the with the other user login by starting, for instance, how is it called? It's a hidden incognito connection where you will be forced to enter your login password to reconnect to Flexera One. Keep in mind the latency you could have if you switch constantly your user from a role to another. You may see some data being refreshed a little bit later. So anyway, if you need to browse from screens to screens, use the user roles. We have a clever screen or multiple clever screens that allow data slicing. So I will be very fast because I tell you now, I will go at least 5 minutes over. You have a number of summary screens that you can see. And this summary screens contain what is called the enterprise filter. And just refreshing slowly. Yeah, I think my virtual machine is pausing when I'm not using it. So every time it's recaching. Okay, maybe in the interest of time, I will finish on the slides. Yeah, okay. I give 3 more seconds. Okay, I will finish in the slides, which are anyway containing the screenshots. Okay, it's here. So you see here, this is my license summary, and I can here, switch. For instance, I want to see my USA consumption. If I'm saving here, you see here that USA appears, and then all the license consumed, used, allocated have been readapted to the new entity I've picked up. So you have 3 screens: publisher summary, product summary, and license summary, which allow to slice the data that way. Moving on, the SAM Operations Hub has exactly the same approach, which is allowing to slice I'm in the Optimization Hub. The SAM Operations Hub allows you to see 19 KPIs of health for your SAM data. So if you didn't open this screen, which is in dashboard for cloud or which is in the SAM hubs here, open this screen. It's very interesting. And this screen is actually adapted to you can slice by location, corporate unit, or cost center. And this was maybe not very obvious, but all numbers have changed because I've picked up EMEA. And the historical view also adapts to the enterprise group that you pick up in this slicer. Okay, so if I go to APAC, probably I won't have a lot of data. Okay, so that's the slicing that you can obtain with this SAM Operations Hub. The last thing I wanted to show in terms of existing screens, go back to the licenses. I'm going to open all licenses. And if you take this one, for instance, license contain the sliced data. So here I was showing 2 examples where you can slice the data on the fly. You pick up another enterprise group or another location. Here, each license has this group assignment tab, which is showing, so here I have no purchase, so it's not very convincing, but you see here the sub-enterprise compliance, and you can slice actually by corporate unit or location or cost center. So I just worked on the location demo data. And you see here, you get a view of your sub-enterprise consumption. And then there are some ways of assigning purchase or entitlements. I'm not a big fan of this one because I prefer, having purchase orders linked to licenses and belonging to entities, which are contributing to this part, for instance. But you can actually modify assignments manually in this part. But here you see, you get the understanding of the consumption per entity. Okay, which leads to the next slide. Here, this is a report. There is a set of reports, license consumed and purchased by location. And basically, this is the first report that got productized, the first of my report that got productized. The idea that what you see in one license, it would be great to see it across licenses. And that's the idea of this report. I'm leaving the license. And you have the report in this license compliance. And you see here, you have these reports, license consumed and purchased by location. And if you run the report, it goes through all licenses and then will compute the purchase, consumption, the costs. This is what we could call a chargeback report. I'm going to filter on Microsoft. And let's say SQL Server 2016. Let's take this one, for instance. Okay. Sorry. Let's take... anyway, the data will be always the same, but you see here, you get the view for this license. So I've grouped by license to make it easier to read. And you see for all licenses, you get the purchase price. You get the tree where the consumption and purchase have happened. And you get for each entity, the cost for compliance. Let's say here, it's $6,000 because you have 6 consumptions. And you get the data that will allow you to do some pivot tables. So you have the level 1, level 2, level 3 entities, as well as the local consumption, rolled up consumption, local purchase, and so on and so on. And at the very end of this one, you see how many installations for each of the entity have caused the license consumption. So this is really a report I've used a lot with large customers where you can see, everything is globally okay, but an entity is under compliant by 6 million. Well, here the numbers are small. And then you can very quickly understand what's happening across your organizations with these reports, which are either sliced by location, corporate unit, or cost center. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to show quickly before I have two or three more slides to go. Sorry for going over time. If you can't stay, you can come back to the recording anyway. But the last way you can slice the data is actually by using a solution which is done for that. And typically here, NRSAM Consulting have developed a Power BI solution where you can see, a C-level. I'm going to clear the slicers, but the idea that you can get data which is very detailed, the cumulative total spend per publisher, the upcoming contracts with the size of the bubble, which is the cost of the contract. We have a very big contract here with Oracle. This is demo data. The most installed applications and the evolution. So you see here, all the data that somebody with a high level of summary needed wants to see. How much am I spending? What is my cost? What are my risks? And of course, so this is quite detailed, total license recharge by location, by corporate unit, and so on. And then if you go on top of this report, you can actually slice on, let's say, Hungary. And you will see that everything, of course, changes because this is the goal of such a solution. The goal of such a solution is to show you the data, and if you slice by location, by corporate unit, eventually, is in the cloud, yes or no, you will see everything readapted to the newer scope you wanted to set up. So this is a very efficient way to deep dive in the data and understand the things. So of course, license recharge by location. You just see Hungary, and you see that there is not a lot that you pay for this entity, for this country. So you can slice the data, and even you can slice some KPIs. I was talking about the SAM operations hub, the active in computer inventory more than 30 days ago. You are here, slightly above the objective, which is 5%. If you focus, for instance, again on this Hungary country, you will see that suddenly the KPIs get completely, you're over because you're at 45%, which is more than the expected maximum for aging inventory. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next step, but the best way to slice the data is to use a tool which is done for slicing the data, and Power BI or Cognos are excellent tools for doing that. And the last topic I wanted to address was the scoping of the licenses. Unfortunately, the world is not monoblock, not easy. So you may not have a unique licensing practice across the organization. You may not have contracts which are global. Some managers may not always work in a central team that will work for everyone. So you may want to have some local sales manager managing their own license compliance. And in the end, you may need to restrict your licenses, which will allow to sort of focus the licenses to a specific entity, and allow to decentralize the license calculations, which sometimes have to be decentralized and not to be across entities, and let people eventually work locally on topics which are not overlapping with the other sub-managers of other regions. So the licensing situations, I would say, if you have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement that doesn't allow to use licenses across regions, if you acquired a company, for instance, that did not obtain the license transfers, so the licenses can just be used within the company, even if now they belong to a bigger organization. If a US IT technician is fully covered by MSDN, but not the UK ones, you may want to distinguish, who can do what in terms of licensing non-production servers. And if you're an MSP, of course, managed services provider, and you provide some licenses, but your customer is liable for the other, each of these cases can be addressed by the license restriction that allows to combine dimensions in restrictions and forces to consider the license the authorized device or users for the license consumption calculations. So the intelligent restriction is another step above the restriction by enterprise group. You can even use a report that will allow you to slice or to restrict the data. So here, I will restrict this license, which is SQL Server Standard Core, EMEA, on the active production devices, because I have MSDN licenses for non-production servers, but only for the location, which is EMEA. That's one example. You can track restrictions of licenses in this report, a license issue analysis, which contains the columns that tell you if there is a restriction by enterprise group or by reports. Okay, and we will finish with the last slide, and sorry for being over time. Next version of the FlexNet Manager will be released on for 2024 R1 will be actually released on July 16th. It contains the SKU browser and the Oracle ABS verified data, enterprise business chat. And you can join and see, access best practice data. I have many blogs, many posts in a blog which are helping you to become a master in SAM with the Flexera technology. So you will see it start from the bottom. The first blog posts were about managing the foundation data, and you get a series of posts that allow you to understand how to use best Flexera One item. What are the best reports and so on. Okay, so sorry to have been a little bit long on that. Thanks for your time, and talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. We really appreciate it. Great session. A lot of really, really good content. Great feedback. A lot of really good questions. So thank you, everyone. And we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.